07:42 a.m., January 5th, 1943, over New Guinea. The roar of twin Allison V-17-10 engines rattles the sky, thick with sweat and gasoline. Heat presses through cockpit glass as P-38 Lightnings slice cloud cover at 8,000 feet. A voice crackles. "Engine 2's sputtering out. Take her in." On the ground, Sergeant Eddie Vance doesn't hear the transmission. He's already running toward the tail of a damaged Lightning, tools gripping tight, the mission riding on his shoulders. The squadron's serviceability rate stands at 62%, 18 planes short of operational minimum. A mechanic's improvisation, a simple wire reconfiguration, might be the difference between mission success and squadron grounding. As Eddie kneels by the cowling, burning oil hits his nostrils. He's seen this damage pattern before. Misfiring magnetos, sluggish control response. Today, he's testing something new, a control circuit modification that might give the P-38 the edge it desperately needs against the Zero. The fate of the mission rests in calloused hands. The sun hovers just above the jungle canopy as Lieutenant Eddie Vance surveys Henderson Field, Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands. January 5th, 1943. A constant hum fills the morning. Planes taxiing, engines turning over, the metallic clatter of wrenches against aluminum skin. The P-38 Lightning, sleek with its twin booms and center nacelle, gleams under tropical light. This is Eddie's world now. He isn't a fighter pilot. He's the man who ensures they stay airborne. His hands bear permanent oil stains, the constant grind of grease and metal making it impossible to tell where work stops and flesh begins. The pilots joke about his foolish mechanic tricks, modifications that push regulations to their limit. They don't understand the desperation behind each improvisation. They don't know what it feels like to be outnumbered 3-1, with Japanese Zeros overhead and replacement parts 3 weeks away by convoy. Eddie crouches beside a Lightning's port engine nacelle. The maintenance log shows the pattern. Recurring magneto issues, sluggish aileron response, insufficient torque in high G turns. One pilot's report reads simply, "She's heavy in the turn, can't keep up with the Zero." Eddie tightens his jaw. He knows exactly what needs fixing. He's attempted similar modifications on training aircraft stateside, but here on Guadalcanal, they're critically short on spare parts. His eyes fall on disconnected radio wire hanging from a junction box, surplus from a damaged communications system. It might be the answer. It's unorthodox, possibly dangerous, but orthodox solutions require parts they don't have. The wire could reroute control surface signals, reducing lag time between stick input and aileron response. A foolish trick, perhaps, but one that might just work. The morning air carries the smell of aviation fuel and salt water. Eddie pulls the maintenance manual from his pocket, dog-eared and stained. Page 47 details the P-38's control circuit specifications. He traces the schematic with one finger, calculating load capacity, resistance values, failure points. The modification is technically feasible. Whether it's survivable under combat stress is another question entirely. The morning air on January 6, 1943 hangs heavy with humidity. Henderson Field's runway stretches before a line of P-38 Lightnings awaiting their next mission. Inside the maintenance hangar, Eddie is surrounded by scattered parts, wire spools, and electrical diagrams spread across an oil drum table. The task is daunting. Find a way to make the P-38 competitive against the Zero's superior maneuverability. Eddie's breakthrough, a control circuit modification using salvaged wire, might be their only option. He pulls the suspect wire from the damaged engine, examining the insulation carefully. The solution isn't in the power plant itself, but in the electrical system governing control surfaces. A simple rerouting of aileron control circuits could reduce signal lag from pilot input to surface movement, faster response time, tighter turns. The modification requires bypassing two junction boxes and running direct wire from the control column to the aileron actuators. Eddie knows the risk. If the wire overheats mid-flight, the entire control system could fail catastrophically. The pilot would lose aileron authority at the worst possible moment, likely during combat maneuvering. But Eddie has watched too many P-38s get outclassed in turning engagements. The Lightning's superior speed and firepower mean nothing if it can't stay on the Zero's tail. The modification has worked on 2 test flights, limited to basic maneuvers. Now it faces operational deployment. With steady hands, he begins the reconfiguration. Corporal Jenkins watches skeptically from the next bay. "That wire's not rated for combat loading," Jenkins mutters. "Regulations call for shielded cable." Eddie doesn't look up. "Regulations assume we have shielded cable. We don't." He crimps the connections carefully, testing each joint for conductivity and mechanical strength. The other mechanics whisper that it's too dangerous, that Eddie's pushing too hard. They don't understand. Sometimes it's these small innovations that shift the balance. If this works, the P-38 will be faster, more responsive, deadlier. It might be their only chance at matching the Zero's agility. The modification takes 4 hours. By noon, the first modified Lightning is ready for flight testing. January 8, 1943, Henderson Field. The Allison engines roar to life, their distinctive sound rumbling across the coral airstrip. It's the 3rd sortie of the day, and Eddie stands at the flight line, watching closely. The pilots are ready, though skeptical. The P-38s have struggled with agility issues since arriving in theatre. This modification, Eddie's improvisation, represents either breakthrough or disaster. The aircraft lifts off, nose pitching up as it clears the jungle tree line. Eddie's pulse quickens as he watches the first test pilot, Lieutenant Marcus Webb, climb into the circuit. The plane banks left in a standard rate turn, engines humming with increased stability from yesterday's magneto adjustments. Eddie's eyes never leave the aircraft as it completes the pattern. 3 minutes pass. Sweat drips down Eddie's temples despite the morning coolness. Webb's voice crackles over the ground radio. Control response is noticeably improved. Aileron input feels more direct. Less mush in the turns. Eddie exhales slowly, but the real test lies ahead. The modification works under standard flight conditions. Combat maneuvering will push every system to its limits. Webb brings the Lightning around for a high-speed pass, diving from 3,000 feet. The twin booms blur as the aircraft accelerates past 250 knots. At the bottom of the dive, Webb pulls hard left, then immediately reverses into a right-hand brake. The maneuver would typically take 3 to 4 seconds to complete. Today it happens in under 2. Eddie can see the difference from the ground. The Lightning's response is crisper, more immediate. Webb lands 12 minutes later, taxiing directly to Eddie's position. Before the engines fully spool down, the pilot is climbing out, grinning. "Eddie, whatever you did, it works. She's responding like a fighter now, not a truck." But Eddie knows this is just the beginning. The Zeros won't cooperate like practice maneuvers. The real test comes when bullets start flying and survival depends on split-second advantages. That test is coming soon. Intelligence reports indicate increased Japanese air activity over the next 48 hours. January 8, 1943, airspace over New Guinea. A voice cuts through the radio static. "Bandits at 12 o'clock low. Count 6. The P-38 formation adjusts heading, diving toward the reported contact. Eddie, monitoring from the operations tent at Henderson Field, feels his heart rate increase. His work has been tested on training flights. Now it faces combat validation where lives hang in the balance. The Zeros appear as dark silhouettes against scattered clouds at 7,000 feet. Their speed is legendary. 330 knots in level flight, phenomenal climb rate, turn radius that makes Allied pilots wary. Eddie leans closer to the radio as combat reports filter back. The modified Lightnings engage, and immediately the difference becomes apparent. "I'm staying with him," Lieutenant Webb transmits. "Aileron response is matching his turn rate." The dogfight evolves rapidly. Bursts of 50 caliber fire punctuate the radio chatter. The P-38s execute maneuvers that would have been impossible yesterday. Tight barrel rolls, snap turns, pursuit curves that keep the Zeros in their gun sights. Eddie's modification has reduced control lag by an estimated 40%, giving pilots the responsiveness they've desperately needed. But even with improved maneuverability, the Zeros remain formidable opponents. One Lightning takes cannon fire to the port boom, hydraulic fluid streaming from ruptured lines. The pilot fights to maintain control, the aircraft vibrating as it struggles toward friendly airspace. Eddie watches silently as the damaged Lightning approaches Henderson Field, landing gear extended at the last possible moment. The engagement lasts 11 minutes. 3 Zeros are confirmed destroyed. All 6 P-38s return, though 2 require significant repairs. Lieutenant Webb's after-action report is terse but meaningful. Control modifications provided tactical advantage in turning engagements. Recommend fleet-wide implementation. Eddie reads the report twice, relief mixing with anxiety. The modification works, but scaling it across the entire squadron means accepting the risks for every pilot, every mission. There's no turning back now. January 8, 1943, continued operations over New Guinea. The second wave launches at 14:30 hours. 6 modified P-38s climb through afternoon thermals, heading northwest toward reported enemy formations. Eddie remains in the operations tent, plotting aircraft positions on the tactical map as radio reports arrive. His fingers trace paths across the grid, imagining the aerial geometry unfolding above the jungle. The engagement begins at 15:02. "Contact. Multiple bandits. 8 o'clock high." The Zeros dive from altitude, attempting to use their superior climb rate and initial energy advantage, but the P-38s don't break formation as expected. Instead, they turn into the attack, ailerons responding instantly to pilot inputs. The modified control circuits allow aggressive defensive maneuvering that would have overstressed the original wiring. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, one of the squadron's 2 female ferry pilots temporarily assigned to combat evaluation, transmits calmly, executing high G reversal. Her Lightning pulls through a hard left turn, then immediately snaps right, tracking a Zero attempting to disengage. The maneuver generates sustained 4G loading. Eddie holds his breath, waiting for the inevitable. Either the modification fails, or it holds. It holds. Chen's guns chatter, tracers converging on the Zero's fuselage. The enemy aircraft trails smoke, spiraling toward the jungle canopy below. "Splash one," Chen reports without emotion. The professional detachment in her voice belies the life-or-death stakes of the encounter, but success breeds overconfidence. Another Lightning, piloted by newly arrived Lieutenant Morrison, pushes the modification beyond its tested limits. He attempts a sustained 6G turn, trying to cut inside a Zero's flight path. The bypass wire, Eddie's improvised solution, wasn't designed for such sustained loading. Insulation begins to overheat. Morrison reports the problem immediately. Control response degrading, port aileron sluggish. Eddie's worst fear is materializing. The modification is failing under extreme stress. Morrison disengages from combat, nursing his aircraft back toward Henderson Field with partial aileron control. He lands successfully, but the message is clear. The modification has limits. Eddie will need to refine it, strengthen it, or pilots will die. January 9th, 1943. Henderson Field. The sun sets behind Mount Austin as the final P-38s return from the day's operations. Orange light glints off aluminum skin as aircraft taxi toward their revetments. Eddie watches from the maintenance area, tools already laid out for the inevitable post-flight inspections. His shoulders carry tension that won't release until he sees every aircraft accounted for. The pilots dismount, exhaustion evident in their movements. Lieutenant Webb approaches, flight helmet tucked under one arm. "Eddie," he says simply, "that modification saved my life twice today. I was able to stay with a 0 through maneuvers I couldn't have matched yesterday." Other pilots nod in agreement, gathering around the maintenance stand. The statistics confirm the tactical shift. 8 enemy aircraft confirmed destroyed, 2 probables, 0 P-38 losses. Before the modification, the squadron's kill ratio against zeros averaged 1.2.1, barely sustainable. Today it jumped to 4.1, a dramatic improvement that will reshape operational planning. Eddie should feel victorious. Instead, he thinks about Morrison's degraded control response, about wire insulation overheating under sustained combat stress. That evening, Eddie remains in the hangar after the other mechanics depart. He examines Morrison's aircraft, tracing the modified control circuit with a flashlight. The bypass wire shows heat discoloration near the wing root junction box. The insulation held, barely, but another minute of high G maneuvering would have caused complete failure. The modification needs reinforcement, heavier gauge wire, better heat dissipation, possibly ceramic insulation if any can be scrounged from radio equipment. Master Sergeant Kowalski finds him at 22 Coca hours, still working. "Eddie, you can't fix every problem tonight." Eddie doesn't look up from his wire diagrams. "The zeros learn fast. They'll adapt. Tomorrow they'll try new tactics, and we need to be ready." Kowalski sighs, but doesn't argue. He's seen this determination before. This refusal to accept good enough, when better, is theoretically possible. The war isn't won, but the P-38s have survived another day. Eddie's improvisation has proven effective. Now comes the harder task, making it sustainable, reliable, and scalable. The work continues. January 15th, 1943, Henderson Field. A week has passed since the initial combat tests. Eddie's modification has been installed on 16 additional P-38s, bringing the squadron's modified aircraft to 22. The improved kill ratio has caught attention beyond Guadalcanal. A dispatch arrives from 5th Air Force Headquarters requesting technical specifications and implementation guidelines. Eddie's foolish trick is becoming standardized procedure, but success brings scrutiny. A technical inspector arrives from Port Moresby, Captain Harrison, an engineering officer with by-the-book mentality and little patience for field modifications. He examines Eddie's work with obvious skepticism, measuring wire gauge with calipers, testing insulation resistance with a multimeter. "This isn't regulation specification," Harrison observes, not quite accusingly. "The wire gauge is insufficient for the rated current load under sustained combat conditions." Eddie meets his gaze steadily. "The wire gauge is insufficient for peacetime safety margins. It's adequate for survival margins. We're not operating in peacetime." Harrison frowns but doesn't immediately condemn the modification. He understands the reality. Regulations are written for ideal conditions, but war happens in far from ideal circumstances. Adaptation isn't optional. It's survival. The inspection continues for 3 hours. Harrison documents everything. photographing wire routings, recording resistance measurements, interviewing pilots about control response characteristics. Finally, he closes his notebook. The modification is technically non-compliant, but operationally effective. I'll recommend conditional approval, pending availability of proper materials. Eddie nods. It's the best outcome he could expect. That afternoon, a supply convoy arrives carrying long-awaited spare parts, including 30 meters of properly rated, shielded control wire. Eddie immediately begins upgrading the modifications, replacing his improvised bypass circuits with regulation-compliant installations. The work takes 2 days. By January 17th, all modified aircraft meet both operational requirements and safety standards. Lieutenant Webb test flies the upgraded system. His report is succinct. No degradation in performance. Control response remains excellent. Eddie allows himself a moment of satisfaction. The modification has evolved from desperate improvisation to engineered solution, from foolish trick to tactical advantage. But the war continues evolving too. Intelligence reports indicate the Japanese are deploying improved Zero variants with better high-speed performance. The arms race never stops. January 26, 1943, Henderson Field. The routine has settled into familiar patterns: morning briefings, midday sorties, evening maintenance. Eddie's control circuit modification has become standard throughout the squadron, with requests for implementation guidance arriving from other P-38 units across the Pacific. The success feels almost ordinary now, which makes Eddie uncomfortable. Complacency kills. His instinct proves accurate. During a morning patrol on January 24th, the Zeros demonstrate new tactics. They've stopped trying to outturn the modified P-38s. Instead, they're using hit-and-run attacks from high altitude, diving through formations with guns blazing, then using superior climb rate to escape before the Lightnings can respond. The improved aileron response doesn't help when the enemy refuses to engage in turning fights. Lieutenant Chen returns from patrol, her aircraft pockmarked with small-caliber bullet holes. They're adapting, she reports during debriefing. They know we've improved our turn performance, so they're avoiding sustained engagements. They dive, shoot, and climb away before we can bring guns to bear. The tactical advantage Eddie created is already eroding as the Japanese develop countermeasures. That evening, Eddie studies aircraft performance specifications, comparing the P-38's climb rate against the Zeros. The numbers are discouraging. The Zero can climb at 3,000 feet per minute. The Lightning manages 2,500. In a pure climbing contest, the Zero wins every time. Eddie can't change the laws of physics. The Lightning's heavier weight and larger wing loading make it fundamentally disadvantaged in vertical maneuvering. But perhaps physics offers a different solution. The P-38's twin engines produce more total horsepower than the Zero's single engine. In a high-speed dive, the Lightning can accelerate faster and reach higher terminal velocities. If the pilots can't outclimb the Zeros, maybe they can outdive them, using superior speed to dictate engagement terms. The Lightning's structural strength allows high-speed maneuvering that would tear apart lighter aircraft. Eddie begins sketching a new tactical approach. The boom and zoom. Maintain altitude advantage, dive at high speed, attack quickly, then use dive energy to climb back to altitude before the Zeros can respond. It's not a mechanical modification, it's a doctrinal one. Sometimes the answer isn't better hardware, it's better tactics. February 3, 1943, Henderson Field. Intelligence reports confirm Eddie's concerns. The Zeros have fully adapted to the P-38's improved maneuverability. Enemy pilots are now briefed on American aircraft modifications, instructed to avoid horizontal, turning engagements in favor of vertical tactics that exploit their climb rate advantage. The tactical benefit of Eddie's modification has diminished, though not disappeared. The arms race continues. Eddie attends the morning briefing, unusual for a maintenance sergeant, but requested by the squadron commander, Major Rutherford. The major is blunt. The Zeros are learning. We need new advantages, new approaches. Sergeant Vance's control modification brought us 3 weeks of superiority. We need the next innovation. The room falls silent, all eyes turning toward Eddie. He clears his throat. The modification improved what we could do in turning fights, but if they won't turn with us, we need tactics that leverage our actual advantages, structural strength and dive speed. The P-38 can safely dive faster than the Zero. We should attack from altitude, use speed for the engagement, then extend away before they can respond. The pilots exchange glances. Lieutenant Webb nods slowly. Boom and zoom tactics. We've heard about them, but haven't trained on them systematically. Major Rutherford leans forward. Can we implement this squadron-wide? Eddie thinks carefully before responding. It's not a hardware change. It's training and discipline. Maintain altitude. Resist the temptation to dogfight. Use speed as a weapon. The squadron spends the next 3 days retraining. Pilots practice high-speed attack runs, learning to fire accurately during rapid dives, mastering the art of energy management. Eddie's control modification remains relevant. Crisp aileron response helps during high-speed pullouts, but now it's part of a larger tactical system rather than a standalone advantage. On February 5th, the new tactics face their first real test. 6 P-38s encounter 8 Zeros over Bougainville. Instead of engaging in turning fights, the Lightnings remain at altitude, diving repeatedly through the enemy formation. The Zeros can't respond effectively. By the time they reverse direction, the P-38s are already climbing away, using dive energy to regain altitude. 4 Zeros are destroyed. All P-38s return safely. The tactics work. February 7, 1943, Henderson Field. Eddie stands in the maintenance hangar as dawn light filters through canvas walls. The tactical success of boom and zoom operations has created new challenges, specifically increased stress on aircraft structures from repeated high-speed dives and pullouts. 3 P-38s show skin buckling near wing roots. The airframes are being pushed harder than design specifications anticipated. He examines the structural damage carefully. The buckling isn't immediately dangerous, but it represents cumulative fatigue that could become catastrophic if ignored. The P-38 is strong, but it's not indestructible. Repeated 6G pullouts from 400-knot dives create stresses that peacetime testing never fully explored. Eddie documents each crack, each buckle, each rivet showing deformation. Corporal Martinez, a new mechanic recently transferred from stateside training, watches the inspection nervously. "Sir, should we be grounding these aircraft?" Eddie shakes his head. "We don't have enough serviceable aircraft to ground anything that can still fly. We inspect, document, and repair what we can. The pilots need to know the airframe limits, but we can't stop flying." That afternoon, Eddie briefs the pilots on structural fatigue. He's direct about the risks. The boom and zoom tactics are working, but they're pushing the airframes hard. 6G pullouts are the limit. Exceed that, and you risk structural failure. He pauses, making eye contact with each pilot. The modification improved control response. The tactics improved kill ratios, but physics still applies. Respect the aircraft's limits. Lieutenant Chen asks the critical question, "How close are we to actual failure?" Eddie considers his answer carefully. The safety margins are adequate for now, but every high G dive reduces those margins. I'm recommending enhanced inspections after every sortie and major structural reviews after every 20 flight hours. Major Rutherford nods approval. Implement it. The balance between tactical effectiveness and mechanical sustainability has become Eddie's primary challenge. The modification works, the tactics work, but the aircraft themselves are aging rapidly under combat stress that exceeds any pre-war projections. Eddie understands the truth. There's no perfect solution, only calculated trade-offs between risk and necessity. The war demands both, constantly. Chapter 10, 378 words, February 10, 1943, Henderson Field. The enhanced inspection regime reveals concerning patterns. 7 P-38s now show significant structural fatigue. Wingskin buckling has progressed on 3 aircraft. The squadron's serviceability rate has dropped to 70%, better than before the modifications, but declining steadily. Eddie works 16-hour days, reinforcing rivet lines, fabricating repair patches from salvaged aluminum, doing everything possible to keep the aircraft flying. A message arrives from Port Moresby. Replacement aircraft are en route, but won't arrive for at least 2 weeks. Until then, the squadron must maintain operations with current assets. Eddie studies the maintenance logs, calculating failure probabilities, predicting which aircraft will need grounding and when. It's grim mathematics. Every sortie brings some aircraft closer to structural failure. The pressure manifests physically. Eddie's hands shake slightly when he holds tools. He sleeps 4 hours per night, dreaming of cracked spars and failing rivets. Master Sergeant Kowalski notices, pulling him aside after morning inspection. "You're running yourself into the ground. The aircraft need you functional." Eddie knows Kowalski is right, but he can't slow down. Too many lives depend on the aircraft remaining airworthy. February 13th brings the crisis Eddie has dreaded. During a routine training flight, Lieutenant Morrison's P-38 experiences structural failure. The port boom develops catastrophic skin cracking during a high-speed dive. Morrison manages to land the aircraft safely, but the damage is severe. The boom's upper skin has separated along 3 rivet lines, rendering the aircraft unflyable without major structural repair. Eddie examines the wreckage that evening, measuring crack propagation, documenting failure modes. The pattern is clear. The boom and zoom tactics, combined with the older airframe's accumulated fatigue, are approaching sustainability limits. He writes a detailed report for Major Rutherford, outlining the structural realities without softening the conclusions. Some aircraft will need to be grounded soon. The squadron's operational capacity will decline further. But even as Eddie documents the problems, he's already considering solutions. Reinforcement plates, modified pull-out procedures, reduced G-load limits for high-time airframes. The CD challenge never ends. Each solution creates new complications. Each innovation carries costs alongside benefits. This is the reality of engineering during wartime. Endless optimization under impossible constraints. February 18, 1943, Henderson Field. The replacement P-38s arrive aboard a Navy transport, 12 fresh aircraft, with 0 combat hours and factory new control systems. Eddie and his maintenance team spend 3 days installing the control circuit modifications on the new aircraft, using the refined specifications that evolved from his original improvisation. The new installations are clean, professional, incorporating lessons learned from 5 weeks of combat operations. The fresh aircraft transform squadron capabilities. Serviceability rate jumps to 92%. The combination of new airframes, proven modifications, and mature boom and zoom tactics creates a formidable fighting unit. Between February 20 and March 1st, the squadron shoots down 27 enemy aircraft while losing only 2 P-38s, both to ground fire. not structural failure. Lieutenant Webb leads a 6-plane patrol on March 1st that encounters 15 Zeros defending a transport convoy. Using refined boom and zoom tactics, the P-38s destroy 7 Zeros and damage 3 more without sustaining any aircraft losses. Webb's after-action report credits the control modifications for precise high-speed maneuvering and the tactical doctrine for engagement success. Eddie reads the report quietly, satisfaction mixing with exhaustion. Major Rutherford submits a formal commendation for Eddie's work, recommending him for promotion and potential transfer to 5th Air Force Headquarters as a technical consultant. The commendation describes the control modification's impact: improved kill ratios from 1.2.1 to 4.5.1, reduced aircraft losses by 40%, enabled tactical innovations that shifted air superiority in the Solomon Islands sector. Eddie doesn't want the promotion or transfer. His place is here, with the aircraft, with the pilots whose lives depend on his work. He requests permission to remain with the squadron. Major Rutherford doesn't argue. Good mechanics are harder to replace than staff officers. The request is granted. By mid-March, Eddie's modification has been implemented across 8 P-38 squadrons in the Pacific Theater. Technical bulletins describe the procedure. Photographs show proper wire routing. Maintenance directives incorporate the enhanced inspection regime. What began as a desperate field improvisation has become standard operating procedure, affecting hundreds of aircraft and thousands of combat sorties. March 15, 1943, Henderson Field. Eddie sits outside the maintenance hangar as sunset paints the sky orange and purple. His hands are finally steady, the exhaustion of the past months having settled into manageable fatigue. Around him, P-38s are being prepared for the next day's operations, routine maintenance, familiar procedures, systems that now work reliably because of innovations born from necessity. The squadron has achieved a kill ratio that seemed impossible in January, 5.21 against a 0. The control modification contributed, but so did tactical evolution, pilot experience, and the infrastructure of maintenance excellence that Eddie helped build. No single innovation won the air war. Success came from accumulating small advantages, from refusing to accept defeat when circumstances seemed overwhelming. Lieutenant Chen stops by as Eddie packs his tools. "We're rotating stateside next month," she mentions casually. "The squadron's earned rest and refit time. You coming with us?" Eddie considers the question. He's been in theatre for 7 months, longer than most mechanics. He's earned rotation, but he's also trained the maintenance crew, established procedures, built institutional knowledge that would be lost if he departed. "I'll stay for 1 more rotation," he decides. "Make sure the new mechanics understand the systems." Chen nods understanding. Some people go home when they can, others stay because the work isn't finished. She's seen both types, respects both choices. That evening, Eddie writes a letter home, his first in 3 weeks. He doesn't mention the combat stress, the structural failures, the nights working until dawn. Instead, he writes about the aircraft, about innovation under pressure, about how sometimes solutions emerge from limitations rather than despite them. The P-38 isn't perfect, but it's become effective through human ingenuity, applied persistently against impossible odds. The war continues. The Japanese continue adapting, developing new aircraft, refining tactics. The P-38 squadrons will face new challenges, require new innovations. Eddie's control modification has become just one tool in an evolving arsenal, but it mattered. It kept pilots alive during critical months when air superiority hung in balance. That's enough. Records later showed that the modified control circuits remained in P-38 service through 1944, eventually superseded by improved factory designs that incorporated the field modifications principles. The innovation lived beyond its inventor's immediate circumstances, evidence that solutions born from necessity often endure longer than those developed in comfort. The hangar empties as mechanics depart for evening mess. Eddie remains a few minutes longer, watching the last light fade from the runway. Tomorrow will bring new problems, new challenges. Tonight, there's simply the satisfaction of work well done, of aircraft ready to fly, of pilots who will return safely because someone cared enough to improve the odds. In war, that's all anyone can really do. Improve the odds, one innovation at a time. The P-38 Lightning's evolution in the Pacific Theater represented systematic adaptation under combat pressure. Field modifications like Sergeant Vance's control circuit improvements, combined with tactical innovations and pilot experience, transformed the aircraft from a disadvantaged heavy fighter into an effective weapon against the Agile Zero. Squadron records from Henderson Field show that between January and March 1943, P-38 kill ratios improved from 1.2.1 to 5.2.1, a transformation driven not by technological breakthroughs, but by incremental improvements implemented by mechanics, pilots, and engineers who refused to accept initial limitations as final constraints. The modification survived war's end in archival form. Technical bulletins, maintenance photographs, after-action reports describing the months when innovation happened in coral dirt hangars rather than factory design rooms. The file closed without ceremony. The numbers had already proven what mattered, that under sufficient pressure, ordinary people accomplish extraordinary things, one careful wire routing at a time.